Yeah, this is a really difficult ask to try to explain the essence of what's happened in the last year from where I stand, which is really deep inside the rabbit hole, to most of you who I assume are kind of on the surface and spending most of your life doing other things. So I will do my best to pick out the key things, but there's always a danger either that I just assume too much or that I assume too little. And so I'll try to make sure there's time for questions so that you can fill in the gaps. Let's start from a year ago when strikes were suspended. We all know that we went on strike over the threat to replace DB by DC. Strikes were suspended when UCU members voted to accept a proposal from UUK in March 2018 to set up a joint expert panel. And by the way, I'm roughly speaking going to be reading from this PowerPoint, so that the PowerPoint, which will be circulated afterwards, will really give you everything which I've said, bar the questions, of course, and answers, to examine the methodology of the USS scheme. And in the meantime, while that methodology was examined, there would be maintenance of the status quo in respect of both contributions into USS and current pension benefits until at least April 2019. And I think that's a key point, really. There was a lot of dissent before and especially during the strikes from the existing valuation methodology. A lot of people began to be skeptical about whether there really was a deficit and how big the deficit was. And the JEP was essentially set up to examine from an impartial point of view just how good the methodology was. And quite rationally, it was argued that in the meantime, there should be no change from the status quo. Or in other words, there should be no detriment, no increase in contributions and no reduction in benefits. And that's really behind the current stance of UCU. We think that, until I say we, obviously UCU is a broad church, but I think I can speak for all of UCU when I say that we think the active and organized and elected bodies and officials of UCU think that that should essentially be the situation until the new JEP report comes out. We should hold the status quo because everything up till now is suspect. The JEP was asked to produce two reports. The first one examining the 2017 valuation, which was published 2018, a year ago, and a second one proposing methodology for future valuations, which is due to be published, well, this autumn. No one knows exactly when. Originally, it was supposed to be in September. The first JEP, which I'll call JEP1, concluded by recommending 6 adjustments to the 2017 valuation, and there they are. If you count the little pink arrow, people have counted the JEP recommendations in a number of different ways, but if you count the pink arrows there, then you get 6. I won't run through them all, except to point out that the first 4 represent fairly substantial changes to the methodology, not massive changes, but still adjustments to the methodology, whereby USS calculates how large the deficit is, if there's a deficit, and how high future service contributions need to be for the next 3 years. The last 2, by contrast, simply incorporate more recent data into the valuation. So they're not really anything like substantive changes. That's important to keep in mind. So after discussing each of its 6 recommendations, that says JNC, that's a mistake, by the way, so it should be JNP. The JEP estimated that the effect of applying the first 5 recommendations would be to bring the total contribution rate down to 29.2% from the level, which I can't quite remember, which is around 30, I think it's 36.6%, which is what the USS valuation had given for the 2017 valuation, would be to bring the total contribution rate down to 29.2%. And then the JEP also added that if the increase from 26%, which is the current levels, or the level as it was at that time, if that was shared 35 to 65, that would give member contributions going up from 8% to 9.1%, and employer contributions going up from 18% to 20.1%. So that's what the JEP estimated would be the effect of applying its first 5 recommendations. And then the JEP report went on to say that applying the 6th recommendation could bring contributions down further. I think it's important to note that the JEP did not start by aiming at a figure below 30% and then figure out some ways in which the total level of contributions could be brought down below 30%. It started by figuring out 6 what it saw as rational and reasonable recommendations by way of tweaking the 2017 valuation for the current 3-year period in time for a more thoroughgoing revisiting of the entire valuation process in the next cycle. What happened was that the UCU endorsed the JEP report and its recommendations as a basis for negotiations. And following a consultation, UUK wrote to USS saying UUK's analysis shows that the vast majority of employers that responded to the consultation are supportive of the JEP's recommendations and therefore wish to see a change in valuation assumptions in line with that put forward. So both UCU and UUK, the employers' organization, welcomed the recommendations, and I emphasize the recommendations, the 6 recommendations, in other words, of JEP1. They didn't mention either of them in their responses, either organization, this 30% figure, which has subsequently been rolled center stage, I think, by UUK Spin Machine. USS then proposed to finalize the 2017 valuation using the November valuation figures, but introducing the increase, which would go up to 36.6%, introducing it in 3 stages: April 2019, October 2019, April 2020. We've already had the first of those increases from 8% to 8.8% for us. The next one, October 2019, was going to take it up to 10.4%, and I think the third one to 11.7%. But it then proposed a 2018 valuation whose outcome would supersede these increases. In other words, there was a backstop, I hate to use that word, but there was a backstop of this 3-stage stepped increase arising from the 2017 valuation, but while setting that out as the stick, if you like, USS also offered the carrot of a 2018 valuation whose outcome would supersede these increases as soon as it had gone through the JNC being the Joint Negotiating Committee, whose job is to decide where increases are going to be divided between staff, between members and employers. And in papers submitted to a JNC meeting in 2018, December 2018, USS stated that the effect of applying the JEP recommendations would be to reduce total contributions to 25.5%. I should say the effect of applying the JEP recommendations to this new 2018 valuation. Why would the 2018 valuation give total contributions of 25.5% as opposed to 36.6%? Well, there's a lot which is opaque about the way that USS operates. So it's hard to tell exactly what the reasons were for this rather drastic reduction, but it looked as if essentially it came down to the fact that the financial environment looked better in the 2018 figures, which are done as at 31st of March 2018, than it did in the 2017 valuation done as at 31st of March 2017. So what this meant was that USS was not only putting in place this stepped increase based on the 2017 valuation as a backstop, which was fairly punitive, going all the way up to 36.6%, but in the meantime was proposing 2018 valuation whose outcome would supersede that, and which they suggested in these private papers. The papers have still not been made public, but everyone talks about this figure of 25.5%, and I can say that I personally have seen those papers, and I can assure you that that figure of 25.5% is there. It's never been denied by USS, and it's become one of those facts which is kind of in the public domain, yet not quite in the public domain. Now, you might think that in that context, once UUK and UCU indeed, it was really not so much up to UCU, but once UUK had accepted the proposal to go for a 2018 valuation to supersede the 2017 one, that USS would have acted in good faith and would have applied the 6 JEP recommendations to the 2018 valuation. But in fact, when we look at what came out of that document, and again, there's too much complexity here for me to go into the detail, but if you look at what came out of that document, which was published in January 2019, and then out of the subsequent bargaining with UUK over the various ways forward, as a result of which USS put forward option 1, option 2, and finally option 3. The final upshot was that USS rejected all of the most significant JEP recommendations. They recommend, the current status that they've rejected recommendations 1 to 4, which require some kind of adjustment to methodology, and they've really only accepted 5 and 6, which, as I said before, require no more than, oops, see if we can get back to. Let's see what I can do here. Which required, as I say, no more than using updated figures. They also did add a 7th change, which incorporated the change in retirement age from 65 to 66, but that wasn't one of the 6 original JEP changes. So there we have it again, essentially the same point that recommendations 1 to 4 have not been accepted by USS, only recommendations 5 and 6. So out of these 3 options, option 1, option 2, and option 3, UUK, this is a point at which UCU didn't really have any look in. UUK accepted option 3, under which contributions would be set at 30.7% for 2 years, and then a 2020 valuation would be able to take into account JEP2, the second JEP report. However, if the 2020 valuation had not been settled by October 2021, then contributions would rise to 34.7%. So quite a big rise from that 30.7%. So effectively what you have here is another kind of backstop arrangement, because USS are saying we'll allow contributions to be set at 30.7%, but if we can't agree on what's to come out of this new 2020 valuation, then the backstop will be that they will rise to 34.7%. So there's this kind of punitive 34.7% figure lurking in the background. UUK then proposed, having accepted option 3, they then proposed to UCU at the JNC that the increase from 26% to 30.7%, and I say 26%, obviously this is the benchmark that I always refer to, things as they were before everything kicked off in 2017. The increase from 26% to 30.7% should be shared 35-65 between members and employers. So members then would pay a total of 9.6% and employers 21.1%. That's the UUK proposal. Now, the situation, this is a proposal which is meant to kick in October 2021. Already, because of this 2017 valuation with those stepped increases, the first of those stepped increases has already kicked in, so we're already paying 8.8%. So what this means is that going up from 8.8% to 9.6%. UCU responded by refusing, arguing that USS should have incorporated all of the JEP's recommendations into the 2018 valuation, not just 2 of them. And if they had done so, then this would have made an increase from 26% unnecessary. UCU also argued that UUK had done little to exert pressure on USS to do this, and therefore that UUK should pay any increase over 26%. Employers should pay any increase over 26%, while members' contributions should remain at 8%. In other words, the no detriment position. There's a slight complication because on the 21st to 22nd of August, UUK made a last-minute offer under which they said that they would pick up an extra 0.5% of contributions, so that members' contributions would be 9.1% rather than 9.6%, and employers would be 21.6% instead of 21.1%. However, they made this offer conditional, and I think this was a very, I'll hold my tongue, but I think this was a very unfortunate thing for them to have done. They made this offer conditional on UCU undertaking to hold no ballots and engage in no industrial action on USS matters. It didn't prevent us from taking ballots and industrial action on other matters until October 2021. And this would have made it impossible for UCU to resort to industrial action in response to the 2020 valuation. So it's not surprising that UCU negotiators dismissed that earlier version of the offer out of hand. And obviously this soured the pitch somewhat when UUK then came back on the 27th of August and revised their offer, taking out that requirement, that moratorium on any ballots or industrial action on USS until October 2021. They made the offer again, this time without that condition attached to it, but in the end, although the negotiators referred it to the Higher Education Committee of UCU, HEC declined it. So the situation is that we have now reverted to the original 9.6% that UCU were proposing. That 9.6% from members and 21.1% from employers has been pushed through the JNC by using the casting vote of the chair, which tends to always side with, I think every time it's always sided with the UUK side as opposed to the UCU side. And so that currently is the official way we are going now. So from the 1st of October, your pension contributions will go up from 8.8% to 9.6%, despite the opposition of UCU. Meanwhile, there is something else which needs to be mentioned, which is the whistleblowing by Jane Hutton, Professor of Statistics at Warwick, and one of the UCU nominated trustees on the USS trustee board. The trustee board is the official decision-making body of USS, but it tends to function, I think not many people disagree with me here, it tends to function as playing simply an oversight role. All the main decisions are taken by the CEO, Bill Galvin, and his associates, and they're then presented to the trustee board for approval. And the trustee board then just approves. However, Jane Hutton has been a consistently skeptical and critical member of the trustee board. She claims that the deficit has been overestimated. She also claims that USS has delayed relevant information that she requested in order for her to be able to assess what the deficit really was. Things came to a head, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but things came to a head earlier this year when it transpired that the pensions regulator had written to USS pointing out that USS had misrepresented their views with regard to what the discount rate should be, and this letter emailed to USS, which was sent to the CEO, Bill Galvin, and to the chair of the trustees, David Eastwood, was not relayed to the rest of the trustees. So Jane Hutton whistle-blew over other things. She's currently suspended from the trustee board. The whole affair has left a bad smell in my nostrils and nostrils of a lot of other people as well. But I can't say more because it's in the hands of the lawyers. I can only say that Frank Field, chair of the Parliamentary Work and Pensions Select Committee, wrote to TPR, to the pensions regulator, over concerns about this whole affair. Here's an opinion piece, a statement from an opinion piece in FT on the 31st of August. USS's governance needs overhauling. For its financial problems to evaporate, UK interest rates would need to rise, or the state to backstop beleaguered academics. They are right to ask why the government shoulders huge pension liabilities for civil servants and teachers, but not for them. Well, there's 2 points there. There are 2 points there, but the first point, which is the one which is most relevant to the slide as a whole, which is USS governance needs overhauling. What happens next? Well, the second report from the JEP, which is due to engage with both the governance of USS and the methodology of its valuation process for these 3-yearly evaluations. That's due to come out this month. There are ongoing negotiations between UUK and UCU via the JNC, despite the fact that the 9.6% figure has been put forward. As always happens, there are continuing negotiations. UUK are waiting to see how much appetite the members of UCU have for industrial action. Obviously, they will calibrate their decision as to whether to make a better offer over this 9.1%, according to how much appetite they estimate there to be. There's a ballot which has already opened and will stay open until the 30th of October 2019. So you should all have, if you're members of UCU, then you should have in your pigeonholes a large envelope containing those 2 ballots. On one ballot on the USS dispute and another separate ballot simultaneously on pay and gender equality. Not for IDS. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, right, thank you. And apologies, I only added this at the last minute. Our General Secretary, our newly elected General Secretary, typo, Joe Grady, will be speaking at Sussex on the 24th of September, 1 to 3 p.m. in Arts A2. So I strongly urge you to come. To come to that meeting. That's open to everyone, whether you're a member of UCU or not. I've added some extra resources here. In particular, there's a very good video. Okay, it's a little bit outdated now. It goes back to June by Sam Marsh, who's the vice chair of the UCU negotiating group on the state of USS, which covers overlaps with the ground which I've tried to cover here. There's a transcript here. If you want to keep up with what's going on, Sam Marsh's Twitter account is, to my mind, the most reliable way of updating yourself day to day. He's always correct as far as I can see. The USS briefs, which as Sarah mentioned, site is here. I keep myself an archive of all relevant materials to the USS dispute, which goes back to 2014 at this date, at this link here. There's a link also to join UCU if you're not a member. Now, there are some additional slides here where I try to explain some of the technicalities in how the valuation is done, the issue of de-risking, the issue of the discount rate, the issue of test 1, and the problems of the decline in the bond yield since between 2014 and 2017. But Sarah, looking over my slides, in her wisdom decided that it was more appropriate to put these as an appendix rather than to suggest that I try and talk my way through them. So I'm not going to do so.